She caught me before I knew I was caught. That's the part I keep going back to, the exact second. My room was dark, the way I keep it. Hers was lit, the way she keeps hers. And somewhere in the glass between us, the courtyard had turned my window into a mirror, and in that mirror she was already looking back at me. Not past me, at me. Her bow stopped halfway through the phrase. I should have moved. A normal person moves. Pretends to water a plant, pretends to check the weather, pretends to be anything other than a man standing still in the dark, watching a woman play the cello at 1 a.m. I didn't move. I just stood there with my coffee going cold in my hand, caught at the glass, while 4 floors of brick said nothing, and the only sound left in the world was the one she'd stopped making. My name is Theo. I'm 36. I make the sounds other people don't notice in movies. Footsteps. A coat being shrugged off. The little wet click a door handle makes when someone's afraid to be heard. If you've ever watched a film and felt a fight in your chest, half of that was somebody like me in a small room hitting things. I'm a foley artist. I've been doing it for 11 years. I'm good at it. It's the one thing I've never once doubted. I'm divorced. It's been 2 years now. I work nights and I talk to almost no one. That last part isn't a complaint. It's just the shape my life took. When the marriage ended, I didn't fall apart in any dramatic way. I just got quieter. The quiet was useful. Quiet is the whole job. So I leaned into it, the way you lean into a thing that's also slowly hollowing you out, and I told myself it was professional dedication. It was a little bit that. It was mostly hiding. The building helps with all of it. It's old. Pre-war, thick walls, the kind of place that creaks like it's remembering something. There's an interior courtyard in the middle, a square shaft of brick open to the sky, and every window in the building looks down into it. During the day it's a wall of other people's lives, plants, laundry, a kid's drawing taped up crooked. At night it empties out. By midnight it's mine. That's why I work the hours I do. The city goes still and the courtyard goes still, and my microphone stopped picking up garbage trucks and arguments and someone's bass 2 streets over. I built the room myself, spare bedroom, mattresses on the walls, a folding table I covered in junk that the rest of the world threw out. I've got a gravel tray for footsteps on a path, a square of plywood for footsteps on a porch, bins of cloth for the sound of some getting dressed, getting undressed, reaching for a hand. There's a box of cornstarch I packed down tight, and when you press into it with your knuckles, it makes the exact squeak of boots in fresh snow. People hear that and their whole body goes cold. They never know why. That's the trick. The realest things are the ones you don't catch. So that's the world. An old building, a dark room, and a man making other people's lives sound true while his own went quiet around him. For 2 years that was the whole story, and I wasn't even unhappy, exactly. I was just alone in a way that had stopped feeling like a choice and started feeling like a fact. Then about 2 months ago, a window across the courtyard started staying lit. 3rd floor, opposite corner from mine. At first I didn't think anything of it. But this one had a pattern. Around 11 the light came on. And then, a little after, the cello started. I didn't see her right away. For the first week she was just sound, a low note finding itself in the dark, then a phrase, then the same phrase again, slower, like she was arguing with it. She'd play 8 bars and stop, play them again and stop. Over and over, the same hard corner of the same piece, and I started to recognize the shape of it before I ever recognized her face. I want to be careful here, because there's an ugly version of this story, and I refuse to tell it. I wasn't watching her. I was listening. There's a difference, and I lived inside it for weeks. A man whose whole life is sound hears a real cello 2 months into a silence he'd mistaken for peace, and something in him sits up. I'd be working, building a rainstorm out of rice and a cookie sheet, and her practice would drift across the courtyard, and I'd stop, not to look, to hear her properly. After a while, I started timing my breaks to her. That's the honest part. Every couple of hours I'd step away from the table, stretch my back out, and there she'd be, working that same passage, and I'd stand at my window in the dark and let it land. I never turned my light on. I told myself that was courtesy. It was also cowardice, but the two looked the same from across a courtyard. I'd see her sometimes. The angle of her, the long line of the instrument, the way she'd push her hair off her face with the back of her wrist when a passage finally went right. And I'd think there's somebody else awake. Somebody else who'd rather be alone with a hard thing at 1 in the morning than asleep and easy at 10. I didn't know her name. I didn't need it. I just liked knowing the building held one more person who couldn't sleep on the world's schedule. Fellow night owl, far enough away to be safe. You can see where this is going. Because tonight the bow stopped halfway through the phrase, and the silence that came after wasn't the practice kind. It was the other kind, the kind where someone has just seen you. I don't know how long we stood there. Long enough that it stopped being an accident and became a thing we were both doing on purpose. I had time to feel my face go hot in the dark, which is a useless place to blush. I had time to think about how this looked. The dark window, the man who never turns on his light, every bad word for what I might be lined up in my head, and I deserved a few of them. Then she set the cello against the wall. She stood. She crossed her room, and I thought, good, she's closing the curtain. This is the part where I become a story she tells someone tomorrow. Instead, she reached up and pushed her window open. The old frame stuck, gave, swung wide. Cold courtyard air moved between the buildings. She leaned both forearms on the sill and looked across the gap at the dark square where she knew I was standing. "You can come to the window," she said. "I already know you're there." Her voice carried clean across the brick, dry, not loud. The courtyard does that, takes a low voice and walks it right to you. There wasn't anger in it. There was something worse, which was certainty. I had a choice. I could stay in the dark and let her wonder. I could be a coward all the way down. Instead, I stepped forward into the spill of light from her side, which was the most exposed I'd felt in 2 years, and I put my hands on my own sill, and I let her see me. "Hi," I said. It came out rough. I hadn't used my voice in hours. "Hi." She tilted her head. "You're the blue light." That landed somewhere under my ribs. "The what?" "You've got a blue work light in there. I see it under your door, sort of. Through the window, 2-3 in the morning, some nights later." She wasn't accusing me. She was just laying it out plain, like a person reading a receipt. "I figured you for a night shift nurse for a while. Then a gambler. Then I decided you were probably exactly what you turned out to be, which is a man who stands at his window in the dark and listens to me butcher the same 8 bars for a month." So she'd noticed too. That was the thing that undid me. The whole time I thought I was the one doing the looking. She'd been tracking my blue light across the dark and building little theories about who I was. The surveillance ran both ways. It had the whole time. And somehow her saying it out loud, head on, no flinch, took the shame right out of it and handed it back to me as something I could survive. "You haven't been butchering it," I said. One of her eyebrows went up. "You haven't. You keep stopping at the same place. Bar 9 where it climbs. You stop because you're not happy with it, not because you can't play it. That's a different thing." I heard myself and wanted to crawl backward into the dark. "Sorry, that was a lot to know about a stranger." She was quiet for a second. Across the courtyard, I watched her decide whether to be unnerved or not. "It is a lot," she said finally. "Men who watch a woman through a window don't usually critique her phrasing afterward." I wasn't watching. I was listening. I know that sounds like the same thing dressed up nicer. It does. It's not, though. I let the cold air sit between us. I do sound for a living. When a real instrument shows up at 1 in the morning, I can't not hear it. That's the whole truth, and it's also the worst possible defense, so. The corner of her mouth moved. Not a smile, the country a smile comes from. "Renata," she said. "Theo." "Well, Theo." She leaned a little further out, like she was actually curious now, like the gap between the buildings had narrowed by a foot. "I have to ask, what is it you do over there? Because the blue light comes and goes, and sometimes I hear things, thuds. Once, I swear, something that sounded like a body." I laughed before I could stop it. The first real one in I couldn't tell you how long. It surprised both of us and bounced off the brick and came back smaller. "That was probably a melon," I said. She blinked. "A melon. Or a cabbage. Depends what's of my neck. I'm a foley artist. I make the sounds for films. When somebody breaks a bone on screen or gets hit, that's not a real bone. Real bones sound disappointing. So we hit fruit. Celery for a snapping finger. A head of cabbage wrapped in a wet towel, you punch it, and it sounds exactly like a man getting hit in a way that no actual man ever does." "So at 2 in the morning, she said slowly, "you were over there, in the dark, punching cabbages." "Punching cabbages," I agreed. "To fake breaking bones, for money." "For money?" "It's a real job. I have an accountant and everything. He doesn't believe me either." She put a hand over her mouth. She almost laughed. I saw the whole thing happen, the catch in her shoulders, the way she pressed her lips down to keep it in, and she nearly lost it, and then she got it back, and somehow that was better than if she'd just laughed. A laugh she had to fight is worth 10 she gives away. "That," she said, getting herself level again, "is the strangest thing anyone has told me in a long time. I get that a lot. By the way, if you've ever stood at a window in the dark too scared to turn your light on, you already understand more about this story than I did at the time. Stick around." I didn't know yet what I was about to break in my own life, and I'd been so careful to never break anything that mattered. We stayed at our windows. I don't know how to explain how strange that was for me. 3 years ago, I had a wife and a dinner table, and a whole apartment full of someone else's breathing. Then I had this. A dark room and a quiet I'd convinced myself I'd chosen. And now there was a woman 4 windows and 1 courtyard away, leaning on her sill in the cold, talking to me like I was a person and not a shadow. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Why so late the cello, every night?" Something passed over her face, brief. She looked down at her own hands on the sill, and for the first time her certainty wavered, just at the edges. "Because nobody's awake to hear me get it wrong," she said. I didn't push. I knew the shape of that sentence too well. It was the same shape as my blue light. We all build the same room, just out of different materials. "For what it's worth," I said, "you weren't getting it wrong. Bar 9 isn't wrong, it's just not finished." She looked back up at me, held it. Across the courtyard, her face did something I couldn't quite read, and the cold air moved, and somewhere below us a pipe knocked twice in the wall, like the building had opinions. "The window glass kills it," she said. "What you've been hearing, it's all muffled, going through 2 panes and 40 feet of cold air. You're getting maybe half of it. Half of it is the best thing I've heard in 2 years." I said it before I could weigh it. It just came out, the way true things do at 1 in the morning when you've forgotten how to perform. She went still. I went still. The sentence hung in the gap between the buildings, too honest to take back. She didn't take it as a line, she took it as information. I watched her file it somewhere careful. "Tomorrow," she said, "I'll leave my window cracked when I practice. The real piece, start to finish, not the broken 8 bars. She straightened up off the sill. "To listen anyway, you should at least hear it the way it's supposed to sound." "I'd like that." "I know you would." There it was finally, the actual smile, quick and gone. "Good night, Theo. Stop standing in the dark, it's bad for you." She pulled her window most of the way shut and crossed back to her cello, and I stayed exactly where I was, in the spill of her light, because turning around felt like undoing something. Here's what I should have done. I should have gone back to my table and finished the rainstorm and gone to bed at 4 like always, and treated this like a strange thing that happened once. That's what the careful version of me would have done. The version that had kept everything quiet and safe and slowly empty for 2 years. Instead, I stood there until her light went out. And I knew, the way you know a thing in your body before your head agrees to it, that tomorrow night I wasn't going to drift to my window by accident. I wasn't going to time a break to her practice and pretend it was coincidence. Tomorrow I was going to be standing there before she even started. Waiting. On purpose. The careful version of me was already gone, and I hadn't even noticed it leave. So the next night I was there first, standing at the glass before her light even came on. On purpose, like I'd promised myself, and it felt about as natural as wearing someone else's coat. She didn't make me wait long. Her light came up around 11. Then the window, sticking and giving the way it always did, swinging wide into the cold. She didn't look for me, she just settled the cello between her knees, set the bow, and started. The real piece this time. Start to finish, the way she'd said. And the difference was the whole world. Through 2 panes I'd been getting a ghost of it. Now the courtyard opened the sound up like a hand uncurling. The low notes came across the brick and sat down in my chest. The high ones found the corners of the building and hung there. I'd spent 11 years chasing realness in a room full of junk, and here was a woman 40 feet away playing a thing that didn't need a single trick to be true. I didn't say anything until she finished. "You don't talk over that." When the last note let go of the air, I leaned out my own window. "Bar 9, I said. "You finished it." She looked across at me, and even in the dark I could see her catch her breath back. "I did?" "You did. Gotta stop fighting the climb. You let it climb." She was quiet a second, then dry as ever. I had an audience. Apparently I behave. That became the shape of it, night after night. She'd play, and I'd listen, and between passages we'd trains across the gap. Small things. Where she grew up, which was 3 states away in a town she described as a gas station with feelings. Where I grew up, which was here 20 blocks over, in an apartment so thin you could hear the neighbor's television choosing reams for you. She asked why I'd never moved to somewhere quieter. I said the quiet was the point. She let that one go, but I saw her file it. We traded questions like that, careful at first, then less careful. And somewhere in the first week, I started answering her with the room. I couldn't help it. She'd draw the bow across a long note, slow, and without thinking I'd reach over to the table and pull a brush across the snare I keep there for soft rain. And the little hiss of it would carry across the courtyard right under her note, like the sound had grown a shadow. The first time I did it, she stopped dead. What was that? Nothing. Brush on a drumhead, it went with the note. She thought about it. Then she played the note again, on purpose, and waited. So I gave her the brush again. She laughed, surprised, the sound bouncing off 4 floors of brick. And that was the game from then on. She'd play a phrase and I'd find the thing in my bins of junk that answered it. A creak of leather for the long sigh she let out when a passage beat her. A single drop of water into a steel bowl, plink, for the place where the melody turned and went sad. She started leaving gaps in the music just to hear what I'd put in them. I had never in my life made sound for anyone who was actually listening. I make it for strangers in dark theaters who'll never know I exist. She was right there, awake, leaning out into the cold, waiting to see what I'd do next. I cannot tell you what that does to a man who'd spent 2 years sure he was finished being part of anything. One night she got an idea. I could see it land on her face from across the gap. She disappeared from the window. Came back with a thermos and a ball of string, the kind you'd tie a parcel with. She knotted the string around the thermos handle, leaned out and started lowering it. Down past her sill, swinging a little, 10 feet 20, the whole drop of the courtyard, and then across the open square toward my side. I had to lean most of my body out to catch it. My fingers closed on warm metal. "T," she called over. "You sound like you're freezing over there. Your voice does this thing." It was still hot. She'd made it strong and put too much honey in it, the way you do when you're guessing at a stranger's taste. I drank it leaning on my sill with the string still connecting our 2 windows across 40 feet of dark, and it was, hands down, the kindest thing anyone had handed me in longer than I want to admit. I wanted to give her something back. Tea I didn't have, but I had the one thing nobody else could give her. I'd been recording her. Not in a way that should scare you. I mean, I'd set a mic in my window the last few nights, pointed out at the courtyard, just to hear what the space was doing to her cello. The brick, the open shaft, the cold air. The courtyard has its own echo, a long soft tail on every note, and from her side, sitting right behind instrument, she could never hear it. She only heard what came off her strings. She never heard what the building did with it after. So the next night I lowered my own line, a little speaker on a string, swinging across the gap to her window, and I played her the courtyard. Her cello, from outside her cello, the notes leaving her and traveling and coming back changed, fuller, with that long brick echo wrapped around them. I watched her face the whole time. She went absolutely still, the speaker in her hands, her eyes somewhere far off. "That's me," she said finally. "That's you. That's what the rest of us get." She didn't say anything for a long moment. When she did, her voice had lost its dryness. "I've been so busy hating how it sounds up close, I never once heard how it lands." "Most of the good things don't happen where you're standing," I said. "They happen where they land." I don't know where that came from. It just fell out. She looked across the dark at me, like I'd handed her the thermos back full of something else. It was around then that the ceiling started talking. 2 floors under me. A knock, then another, soft and even, right up through the floorboards while Renata played. I thought it was a complaint at first. Old building, late hour, a man trying to sleep. I almost stopped the whole thing out of guilt, but the knocks weren't angry, they were on the beat. Whoever it was down there was tapping along. I found out who 2 days later, hauling my recycling down at an hour no decent person is awake. He was in the courtyard doorway, an old man in a cardigan, watering a window of something half dead. Thin white hair, glasses, hands that shook just slightly until they touched a leaf and went steady. He looked at me like he'd been expecting me for a while. "You're the sounds," he said, "not a question." "I'm the sounds." "Okafor." He put out a hand, the grip was dry and warm. 2 floors under you. I hear everything that comes down that shaft, always have." He nodded up at the brick. "You and the cello have been keeping an old man company. I tap along. I hope that hasn't put you off." "That was you. I thought I was getting noise complaints." He smiled and his whole face folded into it. "No, no complaints from me. I played in there myself, you know, for 31 years. He looked up at the square of gray sky. "Saxophone. My wife sang. We'd open the windows on a summer night and let it go down into that courtyard, and people would lean out to listen, and we never once saw most of their faces. We just heard them go quiet. That's how you know they're listening. They go quiet." "She doesn't sing anymore." "She doesn't do anything anymore." He said, easy, no flinch, the way only people who've lived all the way through a grief can say it. 3 years, this winter. The horn's in a case under the bed. "I haven't opened it," he said it like a weather report, and I understood we were not going to make it into a sad thing because he'd done his sad thing already, in private, and this was just the fact left over. I didn't know what to say. He saved me from it. "So," he set the watering can down, "you play her sounds back to her in the dark and she lowers you, T on a string, and the 2 of you have built yourselves a very pretty little system for being close without ever being in the same room." He looked at me over the top of his glasses, and there was nothing unkind in it, but there was nothing soft either. "I know that system. I built one once. Took me about 30 years to understand what it was." What was it? A way to feel something without risking anything. He picked the can back up. It's comfortable, that's the trap. Comfort and cowardice make the exact same face from across a courtyard, son. You of all people should know how easy it is to fake one sound with another. That one stayed with me. I didn't have an answer. He didn't seem to want one. He just nodded and shuffled back inside with his half-dead plant, and left me standing in the courtyard with my recycling and a sentence I couldn't put down. If you've ever built yourself a safe little system for loving someone from a distance, you already know what Okafor knew. Tell me in the comments whether you tore yours down or kept it. I genuinely want to know, because at that point I still hadn't decided. Back to the windows, because they were still where I lived. We kept on. But the conversations got deeper, the way they do at 2 in the morning when the rest of the world has signed off and left you the only 2 people awake. And one night, I asked her the question I'd been circling for weeks. Why so much fight in it, the cello? You play like you owe it money. She didn't laugh. The bow went quiet across her knees. I had an audition, she said, 18 months ago, a real one. The kind you wait your whole life to even get a shot at. She looked down at her own left hand, turned it over in the light. And about 3 weeks before, my wrist went, not dramatically, no fall, no accident. It just started screaming every time I'd held a position, and then it wouldn't stop, and the doctor said tendons and rest and months, and I didn't have months. I had 3 weeks. Did you go? I went. I played through it. Her voice was very flat now, very careful, the way you hold a thing so it doesn't spill.
And I was not good.
I was a person in pain pretending to be a cellist, and they heard it, because that's their whole job, hearing the difference. The letter came 11 days later. I'm sorry. I kept it. She said it almost to herself. The letter, it's folded up in my cello case right now under the rosin. I read it sometimes. Don't ask me why, it's a stupid thing to keep. It's not stupid.
It is a little stupid.
She tucked her hair back with the back of her wrist, that same gesture from the first week, and I understood now it was the bad wrist she was protecting without even knowing she did it. I tell myself I keep it for fuel. To stay angry. To stay sharp. But some nights I think I just keep it, so I never forget I'm the kind of person who fails the one thing she's for. I wanted to climb through the air and take it out of that case and throw it in the courtyard. I didn't say that. I said the only true thing I had. You're not the kind of person who fails. You're the kind of person who played through a torn wrist because the thing mattered more than the pain. That's the opposite. She looked at me for a long time. Then she picked the bow back up, and she played, and she didn't answer, and I let her not answer, because some things you say by not stopping. And then one night she didn't come. 11 o'clock, no light. Midnight, nothing. The window stayed dark and shut. I told myself she had a student late, or a cold, or a life that didn't actually orbit a stranger's blue work light. All reasonable. None of it helped. By 1 I'd built the whole story. I'd overstepped. The wrist, the letter. I'd pushed her into a soft place, and she'd looked at our pretty little system in daylight, and seen it for the strange thing it was. A man who watches. A woman who let him. I went back to my table and I built a thunderstorm out of rice and a sheet of metal, and the room filled up with weather, and underneath it the old quiet came back in like water under a door. It had never left, really. It had just been waiting for the music to stop. 2 nights, then 3, her window dark, every one of them, and me at mine pretending I wasn't checking. On the 4th night, her light came on. I was at the glass before I decided to be. The window opened, sticking and giving. But she didn't sit down to play. She didn't pick up the bow. She leaned both forearms on the sill and looked across at me, and even from 40 feet, I could see something was different. The dryness was gone. The certainty I'd met, on the first night, gone. She looked like a person who'd been somewhere hard and only just got back. I wasn't ignoring you, she said. You don't owe me an explanation. I know I don't. That's not why I'm telling you. She pressed the heel of her good hand against her eyes for a second. It was a bad few days, the wrist. It does this. It just shuts down, and when it shuts down, I can't play, and when I can't play, I'm not anybody I recognize. So I didn't want to sit here and have you hear me not be able to do the one thing you know me for. Renata. Don't be kind right now. I can't take kind through a window. She stopped, steadied herself, and then she said the thing that ended one part of this story and started another. Come down. What? Come down. To the courtyard. The actual courtyard, the ground, not your window. Her voice didn't shake, but it cost her something to keep it that way. I'm tired of talking to you through glass. I've spent 3 days alone in here with my wrist and a folded-up letter, and I don't want to do the safe version tonight. Just come down, please. I was already moving before she finished. 3 flights, my own footsteps, the loudest foley of my life, and out the side door into the open square. The courtyard at 3 in the morning is a different country. Cold, blue, the brick going up on all 4 sides to a small ceiling of sky. And there she was, standing in the middle of it in a coat thrown over whatever she slept in, smaller than I'd built her in my head, and realer than anything I'd recorded in 11 years. We just looked at each other. No window, no string, no echo to hide behind. 40 feet of safe distance collapsed down to 4, and all the cleverness we'd been hiding inside went quiet, because cleverness needs a stage, and this wasn't one. This was just 2 tired people standing on cold stone at the worst, most honest hour there is. She looked up at me. The playful thing was gone out of her face. What was left was bare. "I have to ask you something," she said, "and I need you to not do the foley artist thing where you make it into a joke." "Okay." The whole courtyard held its breath. I swear it did. 31 years of music in those walls, and they leaned in to hear this one. "You said half of me was the best thing you'd heard in 2 years." Her eyes didn't leave mine. A man who hides in the dark and makes other people's lives sound real doesn't say a thing like that by accident. "So what happened to you 2 years ago? What are you hiding from down here in the quiet?" And there it was. The question I'd kept behind glass for 2 years. The one I'd never once said out loud to anyone. Standing in the middle of the courtyard at 3 in the morning, with the only person who'd ever made me want to answer it. I didn't deflect. I opened my mouth. So I told her. I told her the marriage ended because I got good at being half there 2 years ago. I said the word divorce, and it didn't crack the way I'd braced for. It just sat in the cold air between us, small, like a coin I'd finally set down. I said I chose the nights on purpose, that a job recording other people's footsteps gave me somewhere to stand where nobody had to look at me. You can be useful in the dark. You can matter to a film, a scene, a stranger in a theater, and never once be seen doing it. Renata didn't fill the silence. She let me keep going, which is the hardest gift anyone has ever handed me. I told her the part I'd never said out loud. That I was afraid I was only good at making other people's stories sound real. A man breaks a bone on screen. I crack a stalk of celery near a microphone, and it lands in your chest as true. I can make a stranger's grief sound like grief. I can make a kiss sound like a kiss. But my own life had gone quiet, and I'd stopped trying to record it, because there was nothing in the room making a sound. She nodded slow, like I'd described something she already owned. The courtyard was dead still at 3 in the morning. One window lit 2 floors down, Mr. Okafor's, the blue flicker of a television he probably wasn't watching. Our breath showed. Somewhere a pipe knocked once and went quiet. Then she told me hers. She said the wrist injury didn't just take the audition. It took the one answer she'd always had ready. Her whole life, when she got scared that she was too much or not enough, she could go back to the cello, and the cello would tell her she was worth keeping around. The bow on the string, the thing she was for. Then her hand stopped working the way it had to, and she had to sit with a question she'd never let herself ask before. What if the music was the only reason anyone ever chose me? She said it flat, no drama in it, just a fact she'd carried up 4 flights every night. I understood then why she practiced when the building was asleep. It wasn't courtesy. She practiced at night so that nobody would hear her fail, so that the missed notes, the passages her hand wouldn't hold anymore, would die in a dark courtyard with only the brick to judge them. She'd built the same room I had. Mine had a gravel tray and a microphone. Hers had a music stand and a wounded hand. Both of them were places to be alone with the thing you were afraid wasn't enough. We stood there a while. 2 people who'd each found a clever way to disappear, standing in the one spot we'd both been hiding from. I wanted to say something that fixed it. I'm always reaching for the sound that lands, but there wasn't one. So I just told her I was glad she came down, and she said she was glad I got caught at the window, and for a second the cold didn't feel like cold. We went back up before the sun thought about it. The next 2 weeks were the best I'd had in years, which is exactly when the building decided to remind us we didn't get to keep things. It started with a slip of paper under my door. The building manager, a man named Dell who I'd traded maybe 9 words with in 3 years, had typed up a notice. Noise complaints, plural. Somebody on the 3rd floor had logged my recording sessions, the thumps in the cracks at 1 and 2 in the morning, sounds that without context probably did read like a man assembling something terrible in a spare room. And somebody had logged the cello. Late strings, the notice said, like it was a crime with its own subsection. Then the part that actually scared me. A new clause going into every lease at renewal. Quiet hours, 11 at night to 7 in the morning. No exceptions for the tenant, the tenant's instruments, or the tenant's equipment. I read it twice and felt the floor tilt. That clause didn't inconvenience us, it deleted us. The whole thing we'd built, the cracked windows and the thermos on a string and the brushed snare answering her bow, All of it lived in the hours the new rule erased. Renata's only practice time. My only recording time. Our entire country was the night, and Dell had just announced it was being annexed. I went down and told her through the window, because that's still where we lived. She got very quiet. Then she said the thing neither of us wanted to name. If she couldn't practice at night, she couldn't practice at all. Students filled her days. The night was the only door left. For her, the rule wasn't about noise. It was about whether she got to keep trying to be a cellist. I told her I'd talk to Dell. I'm not a man who talks to Dell. But I said it anyway and meant it, and that scared me too, how fast I'd started reaching for things on her behalf. I didn't have to reach far. Mr. Okafor got there first. I found out the way you find out anything in that building through the air. The next evening, the courtyard carried voices up to my window. Dell's, a couple of tenants, and under them, slow and certain, the voice of the old sax player 2 floors down. I leaned out. Okafor was standing in the middle of the courtyard in a cardigan, hands in his pockets, talking to a small crowd of people who lived their whole lives behind their own doors and rarely came out for anything. He was telling them about the building. He said this courtyard was built for sound, that the developer who put the place up in the 50s had shaped the wall on purpose, curved the brick, because he wanted the courtyard to carry music. He said for 40 years it did. He said he and his wife used to play into it on summer nights, his sax and her piano through their open windows, and that half the people complaining now had grown up falling asleep to it without ever knowing whose hands made the sound. He told Dell the quiet clause wasn't protecting the building. It was gutting the music the building was built to carry. I have spent my whole career learning what a true sound is, the difference between a recording that lands and one that doesn't. I knew, listening to him, that I was hearing the truest thing said in that courtyard in years, and it wasn't even his fight. The crowd shifted. You could feel it. A woman from the 2nd floor said she actually liked the cello, said it was the only thing that made the building feel alive. Somebody else admitted the late strings had been getting them through a rough stretch, and they'd assumed it was a recording. Dell stood there with his notice in his hand and the wind taken clean out of it. He didn't repeal the clause that night. Dell isn't built to lose in public, but he said he'd look at exceptions, case by case, which from Dell is practically a love letter. I went down after the crowd thinned. Okafor was still there, looking up at the curved brick like he could see notes hanging in it. I tried to thank him. He waved it off the way old men wave off the only thing that matters. Then he went back into his apartment and came out carrying a music stand. An old one, black, the kind that folds, one of its legs wrapped in tape where the clip had worn through. He held it out to me. He said it was his wife's spare. He said she'd want it standing in a courtyard with music in it, not folded in a closet with him. I started to say I couldn't. He talked over me, gentle, the way you talk over someone when the thing you're saying is more important than their manners. He told me he and his wife played together in that courtyard for 40 years and he never once told her, plain words, what those nights were to him. He assumed she knew. He assumed the music said it. He told himself there'd be time to say it straight, after the next summer, after the next song. And then there wasn't a next summer, and the words he'd been saving stayed saved, useless, locked in a man who waited too long. He looked at me when he said it, not at the wall. He said the music is a beautiful place to hide a thing you mean, but it's still hiding, and you can run out of time to stop hiding. Then he patted the music stand once, like patting a horse, and went inside, and left me standing in the dark holding his dead wife's stand, and the only advice that's ever actually scared me into being a better man. If you've ever loved somebody and assumed the doing was the same as the saying, you already know exactly how heavy that stand was. I carried it up. I set it by my window where I could see across to hers. It looked like it had always belonged there. I should have felt the warning land and act on it. Instead, the world did the thing the world does. It moved the deadline up. 2 nights later, Renata appeared at her window with a different face, lit up and terrified at once, which on her looked almost the same. She'd gotten an email, the orchestra, the same one whose rejection she kept folded in her cello case like a bruise she pressed on purpose. A spot had opened. A cellist withdrew. They were holding a callback round for the people who'd been close the first time, and she'd been closer than she let herself believe. The audition was in another city, a train and a half away, 3 weeks out to the day. She told me, and her voice did something I hadn't heard it do. It shook with the good kind of fear. You've time to stop letting yourself feel because hope costs more than disappointment. And under my own happiness for her, fast and ugly, came the other thing. 3 weeks, another city, the exact shape of the future I'd been carefully not picturing. We'd spent every night turning a will they into something warm and slow in ours. And in one email it became a different question entirely. Not whether two careful people would ever reach across a courtyard. Whether anything we'd built could survive being chosen out loud, with a train ticket and a new city, and a real life pulling one of us away. It stopped being will we, it became can we. Those are not the same question. The first one is a door you're afraid to open. The second one is a door already swinging, with weather coming through it. I told her it was wonderful. I meant it. I also heard how careful I made my voice, how I tucked the rest of it away on instinct, the Foley man burying the real sound under a cleaner one. She heard it too, she always hears it. But she let me have the cowardice that night, because she had her own storm to stand in. She went back to her cello. Through the cracked window, I heard her start the audition piece, slow, finding it again, her hand fighting her the whole way. And I sat by Okafor's wife's music stand and listened to a woman, 3 weeks from leaving, and said nothing the way I always say nothing. The way the old man downstairs once said nothing for 40 years. The next morning there was something on my windowsill. It hadn't been there when I went to bed. Outside on the ledge, weighed down with a small stone from a planter, sat a square of folded paper. I knew what it was before I opened the window. I'd heard about it for weeks and never seen it. The rejection letter. The one she kept in her cello case and reread like a grudge. The one nobody else got to touch. She'd come up sometime before dawn, or sent it across some way I didn't see, and left it on my sill, on purpose, weighted down so the wind couldn't take it. I didn't open it right away. I understood, holding it, that she wasn't showing me a piece of paper. She was showing me the part of herself she practiced at night to keep hidden. The worst sentence anyone had ever written about her, the one that said the music, the only thing she trusted to make her worth choosing, hadn't been enough. She'd handed me the proof of her deepest fear and left no note, because the leaving was the note. It was an invitation to read who she actually was, to see the failure she hid in the dark and stay at the window anyway. She'd done it, the brave thing, she'd let herself be seen first. And I stood there with her folded letter in one hand, and a dead woman's music stand at my side, and a deadline 3 weeks out, and I felt the whole thing close in. Because the rules were tightening. Dale's exceptions hadn't come through yet, and the courtyard was already going quieter. Tenants policing themselves, the night world we lived in shrinking, by the hour, and the woman across the way had just packed her courage into a square of paper and trusted me with it. And every safe instinct in my body wanted to do what I do best, send a supportive text, wish her luck, stay behind glass where it's warm and nobody has to watch you mean something out loud. I could feel the comfortable distance for what it finally was, not safety. The same closet Okafor's words had stayed folded in for 40 years. Mine just had better acoustics. She was going to get on a train in 3 weeks whether I said it or not. The only thing I got to decide was whether she left knowing or left the way the old man let his wife leave, with the truest thing still saved, still useless, still locked in a careful man who told himself there'd be time. I held her letter and I did not open it yet. And I understood that the looking was over. That part was easy. The window, the noticing, the months of timing my bow. Any coward can look. What came was next, the thing I'd built my whole quiet life to avoid. I was going to have to say it. Or watch the door swing shut for good. The night before her audition, I almost did the safe thing. I'd typed it out already. Good luck tomorrow. You'll be incredible. I had my thumb over the send button, sitting in the blue light of my work lamp, ready to wish her well from exactly where I'd always been. Behind glass. 20 feet of dark courtyard and a pane of cold window between me and the one person who'd noticed I was alive. It was the perfect message. Warm enough, distant enough. The kind of thing you send so you don't have to stand in front of somebody and mean it. I almost sent it. Then I heard Okafor's voice in my head from 2 floors down the night he handed me his wife's music stand. You can run out of time to stop hiding, he'd said. He hadn't meant it as advice. He'd meant it as a confession. A man telling me the shape of his own biggest regret so I wouldn't carve mine the same way. I put the phone face down on the tray of gravel. Across the courtyard, her window was lit. I could see shadow moving behind the curtain, the long arm of the cello neck rising and falling as she packed it for the morning. She was leaving at 6 to catch the train to the callback. 3 weeks I'd known this was coming. 3 weeks I'd been rehearsing the version of myself that lets people go without a word, because that version never has to find out if he'd have been wanted. She'd left her folded rejection letter on my windowsill. The old one. The audition she thought she'd lost forever. She'd put it there on purpose, the way you hand someone the worst page of your story and watch their face to see if they flinch. I'd read it a dozen times by then. I knew what it cost her to let me hold it. The paper had gone soft at the creases from how many times she'd unfolded it herself, Over a year, in the dark, alone. A supportive text was an insult to a woman who'd done that. So I did the thing I'd built my whole quiet life to avoid. I unplugged the rig. I want to be honest about how this actually went, because it wasn't brave the way movies make it. Look. My hands were shaking on the cables. I carried my recorder and my little field mic and a battered speaker down 4 flights of stairs at 1 in the morning, and I was sure the whole way down that I was about to humiliate myself in front of the only good thing that had happened to me in 2 years. I stood in the dark courtyard with the cold coming up through my socks, looking up at her lit window, and I almost turned around twice. But I'd brought something with me, months of it. Here's the part I never told her through the glass. All those nights I said I was just recording the courtyard's echo, learning how the space carried sound. That was half true. The other half is that I'd been recording her, quietly, her warm-up scales. The piece she kept stumbling on at bar 40. The little frustrated breath she let out when her wrist gave. The night she finally played the thing clean and laughed at herself in the empty room, because no one was supposed to hear. I had all of it. Hours. A secret library of a stranger slowly becoming the person I thought about all day. I'd kept it because I was lonely, and it was the closest thing I had to company. That's the ugly truth of it. A lonely man hoarding the sound of someone else's life. I'd nearly deleted the whole folder a dozen times. Sure, it made me somebody I didn't want to be. But every time my thumb hovered over erase, I'd hear one bar of her getting it right after a month of getting it wrong, and I couldn't throw away proof that a person could get better at the thing that scared them most. I think I kept it for me as much as for her. I needed to believe that was still possible for someone like me. So I set the speaker on the cold stone. My thumb shook on the play button the same way it had shaken over that send button an hour before, and the only thing that had changed was where I was standing. Up in my attic was easy. Down here with no glass to hide behind, nothing was easy, and that was the whole point. I pressed play, and I let it carry up into the dark. Her own cello came back to her off the courtyard walls. 3 seasons of it at once. The bad nights, the good ones, the stumbles and the clean runs, the laugh. I'd cut it together so it built, the way she'd actually gotten better, the way a wrist learns to forgive itself 1 bar at a time. The sound climbed the brick and bounced and filled the whole hollow square of the building. Her window slid open. She leaned out, hair down, confused, then not confused. I looked up at her. No glass this time, just 20 feet of air and the truth I'd been muting for 2 years. "I've been looking," I said. My voice cracked on it and I let it. "I've been looking at you for months, and I told myself it was about the cello and the echo and the recording, but it wasn't. I was lonely. I've been so lonely I forgot it was a thing a person could fix. And then you opened your window that first night and said my name like I was somebody worth catching." She didn't say anything. She just held the sill and listened, and her own music kept rising around us. "You let me read your letter," I said. "The worst day of your life, folded up, and you put it on my mine. This is the first thing in 2 years I haven't wanted to mute. Being seen by you. I don't know how to do it well. I'm doing it badly right now in my socks in a courtyard at 1 in the morning. But I wanted to be the one who says it this time. Not you. Me." The recording reached the part where she'd played it clean and laughed. Her laugh came down off the walls, the real one, the private one she didn't know I'd kept. And up in the window, the live version of her put a hand over her mouth, and her shoulders started to shake, and I couldn't tell from down there if she was laughing or crying. Both, it turned out. People can do both. She came down, bare feet on the cold stair. I heard them the whole way. 4 flights of footsteps I didn't have to fake with a tray and a microphone. Real ones. Coming toward me. Now here's what I need you to understand, because this is the part I'd have gotten wrong if I were younger. She did not stay. She still went to the audition. We stood in that courtyard until the sky went gray at the edges and we did not solve each other. I didn't ask her to choose me over the thing she'd been rebuilding her wrist for 2 years to reach. That would have been another kind of cage, just dressed up as love, and she didn't offer to. She's not a woman who folds up her own life to make a man feel chosen. That was always part of why I couldn't stop looking. What we did instead was smaller and harder. We told each other the truth, and then we let each other keep our lives. I gave her the recording. The clean cut, the one that built. I told her to put it in her ears. On the train, on the platform, in the cold hallway outside the audition room where she'd be sitting with 40 other cellists who weren't shaking off a year of being afraid the music was the only thing that made them worth choosing. I told her that whatever happened in that room, the courtyard had already heard her play it perfect. The walls had kept it. I had kept it. She didn't have to prove it to a panel to make it true. She left at 6. I walked her to the train, which is a thing I'd never done for anyone in this city, and I stood on the platform like a man in an old film, and I did not cry until the train was actually gone. She called me from the platform on the other end. Not after. Before. Standing outside the room with my recording still in one ear and the live morning in the other. "I'm putting it in now," she said. "Your version. I'll play to the room and I'll hear the courtyard underneath it." Then she went in. I'm not going to tell you she got the chair, because that's not the part that mattered, and I think you already know that. What mattered is that she walked into that room carried, instead of carrying it all alone. She walked in chosen, and choosing back, and not asked to give up a single thing to be either. She did well, I'll leave it there. She did well and she came home, and we kept choosing it on purpose, both of us, with our eyes open, which is the only way it ever holds. The same week she got back, I heard something I hadn't heard in the whole time I'd lived in that building. A saxophone, coming up the courtyard, low and slow and a little rusty, a man finding his lip again after years of silence. Okafor. He'd told the manager and half the tenants that the courtyard was built for music, back when the lease clause threatened to shut us all down. He'd stood up for 2 night owls he barely knew. But he'd kept his own horn in its case the whole time. 2 floors down, the widower who used to play duets into this same square with his late wife, who'd warned me about running out of time to stop hiding, had been hiding the loudest of all of us. I think watching us do the frightening thing gave him back his own. He started playing into the courtyard most evenings after that. Nothing fancy. Old standards, the ones he and his wife used to trade. Some nights Renata would lean out and answer him with a cello, and the two of them would carry a tune across the dark between their windows while I sat in mine and recorded the whole thing, not in secret now, just for the keeping. He never made a speech about it. He just opened his window and let the sound out, finally, before he ran out of time to. That's the closest thing to a lesson this whole story has, and it came from an old man's saxophone, not from me. 2 springs later. Same courtyard. Same hour past midnight when the building goes quiet enough to hear a thing land. I'm at my window with the lamp off, the way I always start, because the dark is still where I work and probably always will be. Below me the gravel tray, the cloth, the little box of cornstarch I press when a film needs the sound of snow. The footstep sounds and the breaking bone cabbages and all the noises nobody notices, still my trade, still my quiet. But the window across the courtyard is open, wide open, not cracked the way it was that first careful night. Open, with the lamp on, and a cello leaning into the frame, and a woman I love tuning a low string with the patience of somebody who isn't afraid of the room hearing her get it wrong anymore. And here's the thing about the dark and the glass. That first night, 2 years before all this, I'd been frozen right here, caught at this exact pain, the courtyard reflection giving me away, her eyes already on mine and my whole body braced for her to close the curtain on the lonely man who watched. I'd thought being caught looking was the worst thing that could happen to me. Tonight she catches me again. Same window, same reflection in the glass. She looks up from her tuning and finds my shape in the dark, and she doesn't reach for the curtain. She lifts the bow at me, a little salute. "Hello, you." And I lift my mic at her the same way, and the two sounds go out into the courtyard together, her cello and the dry brush of my footstep tray, sharing the same air, neither one hiding under the other. 2 floors down a saxophone joins late, because Okafor never could resist a duet. Being caught at the glass used to be the nightmare, now it's just how we say goodnight. I've thought a lot about what I'd tell that frozen version of myself from the first night, if I could lean back through 2 years of dark and reach him. I wouldn't tell him not to look. The looking was never the sin. Everybody who's ever been lonely has stood at a dark window and watched a warmer one and ached. The brave thing was never the looking. The brave thing was admitting that I was looking for someone, that the watching had a name and the name was a wish, and that wishing out loud, in your socks, in a cold courtyard, with your voice cracking, is the only way the someone ever gets to wish back. I muted everything for 2 years because silence felt safer than being heard wanting something. It wasn't. It was just lonelier with the volume off. So let me ask you. If you'd been the one at that dark window, caught looking across a courtyard at someone you'd been quietly aching toward for months, and they opened their own window and said your name out loud instead of closing the curtain, what would you have done? Would you have made a joke and stepped back into the dark? Or would you have gone down the stairs? I want to hear your version. Tell me in the comments, the time you got caught looking, or the time you didn't say the thing and wished you had, or the night you finally did and it changed everything. I read them. I keep them the way I keep every other sound worth keeping. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.